Single mother Sarah Chen was facing her third eviction notice in 8 months, while struggling to feed her 6-year-old daughter Emma on $1,940 monthly from 2 part-time cleaning jobs and $340 in food stamps, when her ex-husband's bankruptcy attorney, her own legal aid lawyer, and every family member unanimously warned her against purchasing the completely worthless, abandoned Desert Vista Motel in remote Barstow, California, that came with $43,000 in back taxes, no functioning utilities, severe water damage from burst pipes, 32 rooms filled with squatter debris, and a location 60 miles from decent employment opportunities. But she had no idea that renovating room 237 and peeling back the faded floral wallpaper would reveal a reinforced steel door, concealing a fully operational FBI interrogation facility with recording equipment, psychological assessment tools, and classified documentation of domestic surveillance operations conducted between 1987 and 2003, transforming a desperate single mother facing homelessness into the recipient of a $8.9 million federal whistleblower compensation package and exclusive consulting contracts with congressional oversight committees investigating decades of unconstitutional domestic intelligence operations. Before we dive into this incredible journey, drop your location in the comments below and smash that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story will absolutely blow your mind. At 28 years old, Sarah Chen was staring at her daughter Emma's empty lunchbox at 4:15 a.m. on what would be another 18-hour workday, calculating whether she could afford both the $127 grocery bill for Emma's school lunches and the overdue $240 electricity bill from Pacific Gas and Electric, while surrounded by final notice demands, threatening letters from landlord Roberto Martinez about $2.80 in unpaid rent spanning 3 months, and court documents related to her ex-husband Michael's Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing that had permanently eliminated all child support payments totaling $840 monthly for the past 14 months since his construction company collapsed during the economic downturn, the financial catastrophe that controlled every waking moment of Sarah's existence included credit card debt totaling $23,400 accumulated during Emma's emergency asthma hospitalization when Sarah had to take unpaid leave from both jobs, medical bills exceeding $8,900 despite Medicaid coverage that excluded specialist treatments Emma needed for severe allergic asthma, accumulated late fees from PG&E, Verizon, and State Farm auto insurance that had grown to $1,240 in additional penalties. She couldn't satisfy while working 55 hours weekly at 2 different commercial cleaning companies that paid subcontractor rates without benefits or job security. The crushing mathematical reality that kept Sarah awake during the 4 hours between arriving home from Memorial Hospital's night cleaning shift and leaving for Westfield Business Center's morning office. Cleaning was that her combined monthly income of $1.840 from both employers could no longer cover even basic survival expenses for herself and 6-year-old Emma, while mandatory childcare costs consumed $960 monthly through Riverside Unified School District's extended care program, leaving exactly $880 for rent, food, transportation, medical co-payments, utilities, and every other necessity of life for 2 people in California's increasingly expensive inland region. The employment schedule complexity that Sarah navigated daily included morning cleaning, shifts at Westfield Business Center from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. that required leaving Emma with elderly neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez at 4:30 a.m., afternoon transportation between job sites using unreliable public transit that consumed 2 hours and $8.50 in bus fares, evening hospital janitorial work from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. when the last bus had stopped running, and weekend requirements at both locations that eliminated any possibility of pursuing better employment opportunities. Attending job training programs, or spending quality time with Emma, who asked repeatedly why Mommy was always working, but they still couldn't afford birthday parties, new clothes, or the educational supplies other children brought to Riverside. Elementary school. The childcare crisis that complicated every aspect of Sarah's survival strategy included Emma's after-school program, costs through RUSD extended learning that consumed 47% of Sarah's gross monthly income, babysitting expenses averaging $280 monthly for evening work shifts that required finding reliable, background-checked care in a neighborhood where most residents had criminal records or immigration status concerns, summer care requirements that would cost $1.400 monthly when school ended in 6 weeks. Money Sarah didn't have, while facing the legal reality that Emma couldn't be left alone during 12-hour workdays without triggering Child Protective Services intervention that could result in permanent custody loss. The transportation breakdown crisis that threatened Sarah's ability to maintain employment included her 2012 Honda Civic, requiring $2,800 in transmission repairs after the third gear failed during her commute to Memorial Hospital, expired vehicle registration due to inability to pay $394 in renewal fees while managing immediate survival expenses, auto insurance cancellation by State Farm that occurred when automatic payment authorization failed due to insufficient funds in her checking account that was overdrawn by $340 following delayed processing of Emma's urgent care copayment for an asthma attack that required nebulizer treatment and steroid injections. The banking relationship deterioration that cascaded from Sarah's financial crisis included Wells Fargo's closure of her checking account due to excessive overdraft fees totaling $896 accumulated over 4 months. Elimination of direct deposit capabilities that forced reliance on expensive check cashing services that charged 3.5% fees for paycheck processing, forced use of prepaid debit cards for basic transactions that provided no fraud protection while charging $295 monthly maintenance fees, plus transaction charges that consumed additional money Sarah needed for transportation and food expenses. The health insurance complications that Sarah faced despite Medicaid eligibility included coverage limitations that excluded Emma's pediatric pulmonologist, Dr. Amanda Foster, at Children's Hospital of Orange County, prescription co-payments averaging $180 monthly for albuterol inhalers, Flovent steroid treatments, and emergency EpiPens that Emma needed for severe environmental allergies, emergency room visits to Riverside University Health System that generated bills exceeding $1,200. Despite insurance coverage, when Emma's asthma attacks required immediate treatment involving nebulizers, oxygen monitoring, and chest x-rays that couldn't wait for scheduled appointments with primary care physicians who had 3-week waiting periods. The healthcare rationing strategy that Sarah implemented to manage medical costs included postponing her own routine gynecological care, dental cleanings, and vision examinations to prioritize Emma's respiratory treatments, skipping recommended follow-up appointments when $45 co-payments competed with grocery money needed for Emma's school lunches using over-the-counter medications. Instead of prescribed treatments when pharmacy costs at CVS exceeded her available funds, and limiting Emma's exposure to outdoor activities during high pollen seasons to reduce emergency medication needs that could trigger expensive urgent care visits. The food insecurity reality that had become a central feature of their daily existence included careful meal planning that prioritized Emma's nutritional needs for proper growth and asthma management, while Sarah frequently skipped breakfast and lunch to stretch grocery budgets. Reliance on Riverside Food Bank distributions every Tuesday that required transportation costs and 2 hours away from potential work opportunities, strategic shopping at Dollar Tree and Food 4. Less for basic staples while maintaining the illusion. To Emma, that their circumstances were temporary setbacks rather than the result of systematic economic forces beyond Sarah's individual control or personal responsibility. The housing instability crisis that characterized their living situation included monthly rent of $250 for their cramped one-bedroom apartment at Vista Gardens complex that consumed 68% of Sarah's gross income, utility bills averaging $190 monthly that forced impossible choices between electricity for Emma's nebulizer treatments and food purchases when unexpected medical expenses arose. Constant fear of eviction proceedings that affected Emma's sleep patterns and academic performance, while Sarah maintained exhausting work schedules to prevent homelessness that seemed increasingly inevitable given the mathematical impossibility of her current income trajectory covering necessary survival expenses for two people. The educational impact that Emma experienced at Riverside Elementary included difficulty concentrating during reading lessons when hunger affected her attention span and cognitive function, embarrassment about participating in free lunch programs and wearing second-hand clothes donated by church charity drives that marked her as economically different from middle-class classmates whose parents could afford school fundraisers and field trip fees. Behavioral changes, including withdrawal and anxiety, that teachers attributed to unstable home conditions, while Sarah struggled to provide emotional support and homework assistance during her own crisis management that consumed all available physical and mental energy reserves. The credit score destruction that resulted from missed payments during Emma's medical emergencies had reduced Sarah's FICO score from 640 to 387 within 18 months, eliminating her access to conventional credit cards, personal loans, or store financing options, preventing apartment rentals in safer neighborhoods that required credit checks and income verification, disqualifying her from employment opportunities at banks, retail stores, or cleaning companies that required background investigations including financial responsibility assessments for positions involving access to client properties, cash handling, or unsupervised work in private residences. The legal complications cascade that Sarah navigated included monthly court appearances for medical debt collection proceedings initiated by Riverside University Health System, Children's Hospital Billing Department, and emergency radiology services that required unpaid time off work and potential wage garnishment orders. Landlord-tenant disputes about habitability issues in their apartment, including broken air conditioning during summer months that triggered Emma's asthma attacks. Family court proceedings related to child support enforcement that generated attorney fees exceeding $2,400 through Riverside County Legal Aid, while producing zero additional income when Michael's bankruptcy had eliminated his construction business assets, personal savings, and current employment income. The social isolation phenomenon that characterized Sarah's existence included complete elimination of social activities that required any financial expenditure, reduced participation in Emma's school, events, including parent-teacher conferences that conflicted with work schedules and classroom volunteer opportunities that demanded availability during earning hours, emotional exhaustion that made maintaining friendships with other parents difficult during constant stress about basic survival needs, geographic isolation from family support networks when Sarah's parents lived in expensive Orange County where visiting required gasoline money and time away from income-generating employment that couldn't be sacrificed for relationship maintenance. The seasonal employment complications that Sarah faced included reduced cleaning hours at Westfield Business Center during summer months when many tenant businesses operated with skeleton staffs, increased competition for available shifts at Memorial Hospital, when other part-time employees needed additional income during slow periods, utility cost increases during Riverside's extreme summer heat that made air conditioning essential for Emma's respiratory health while creating electricity bills exceeding $340 monthly that competed with food and transportation expenses essential for maintaining employment access. The mental health deterioration that Sarah experienced included anxiety attacks triggered by collection agency phone calls from portfolio recovery associates, Midland Credit Management, and other debt purchasers who contacted her workplace demanding immediate payment arrangements, depression symptoms that affected her energy levels during physically demanding cleaning work that required maintaining professional standards while managing personal crisis, chronic stress that caused physical symptoms including frequent headaches, digestive problems, and insomnia that required medical attention she couldn't afford while working in healthcare facilities that provided services she couldn't access. For her own needs, the neighborhood safety concerns that affected Emma's daily life included increasing crime rates in their section of Riverside, where Sarah could afford rent, gang activity near Riverside Elementary that required careful route planning for Emma's walk to and from school, property crime that threatened their few valuable possessions, including Sarah's work uniforms and Emma's school supplies, environmental health hazards, including air pollution from nearby industrial facilities that exacerbated Emma's asthma, while they couldn't afford to relocate to cleaner areas with higher housing costs that exceeded Sarah's income capacity. The transportation dependency crisis that affected every aspect of their survival included Sarah's 2012 Honda Civic failing emissions testing due to check engine light problems requiring $680 in diagnostic testing and catalytic converter replacement, expired vehicle registration that made driving illegal but remained necessary for reaching employment sites that weren't accessible through public transportation, auto insurance lapses that created liability risks when driving was essential for maintaining the income needed to afford insurance premiums that had increased to $287 monthly due to her lapsed coverage history and credit score deterioration. The utility service disconnection threats that escalated throughout the spring included electricity termination warnings from Pacific Gas and Electric when unpaid bills reached $486 during March heat wave that required air conditioning for Emma's breathing comfort, internet service cancellation by Spectrum that eliminated Emma's access to online homework assignments and Sarah's ability to search for better employment opportunities, cell phone service suspension warnings from Verizon that threatened communication, capabilities essential for coordinating childcare, work schedules, and emergency contact with Emma's school when asthma episodes required immediate parent notification. The prescription medication access crisis that developed when Sarah's Medicaid card was temporarily suspended due to income reporting. Complications included inability to refill Emma's rescue inhalers that cost $127 each without insurance coverage, rationing of daily controller medications to make prescriptions last longer, despite potentially dangerous dose reductions that could trigger severe asthma attacks, elimination of Emma's allergy medications during Riverside's peak pollen seasons, when environmental triggers required pharmaceutical management that competed with food and housing expenses for limited budget allocation. The professional development impossibility that Sarah faced included inability to pursue GED completion that could qualify her for better-paying employment due to class schedules that conflicted with her work obligations, elimination of job training programs offered through Riverside Community College that required daytime attendance when she needed to be earning income, reduced access to employment resources, including resume writing assistance and interview coaching, that could improve her job prospects, but required transportation costs and time away from survival-focused work schedules that couldn't be interrupted without risking termination. The family relationship strain that intensified during Sarah's Crisis included her mother Linda's disappointment about Sarah's divorce and financial struggles, despite Linda's own limited ability to provide assistance while working retail at Target. Conflict with her sister Jennifer, who questioned Sarah's parenting decisions and suggested just getting a better job, without understanding the employment barriers created by Sarah's lack of education, transportation limitations, and childcare responsibilities, isolation from extended family members who became exhausted by ongoing crisis requests for small loans that Sarah couldn't repay while managing immediate survival needs. The documentation and paperwork burden that consumed Sarah's non-working hours included monthly Medicaid recertification requirements that demanded extensive income and expense verification, school district paperwork for Emma's free lunch eligibility and extended care enrollment, court filing deadlines for debt collection responses, and child support enforcement that required legal knowledge she didn't possess, employment record maintenance for multiple part-time positions that had different payment schedules, tax identification requirements, and worker classification procedures that created administrative complexity beyond her educational background. The emergency assistance limitation that Sarah discovered included non-profit organizations serving low-income families that had waiting lists exceeding 4 months and eligibility requirements excluding people with any employment despite inadequate income levels. Utility assistance programs through Riverside County that provided maximum benefits of $200 annually, while her electricity bills averaged $190 monthly. Food assistance through CalFresh that provided $340 monthly in benefits but didn't cover household necessities like cleaning supplies, personal hygiene items, or school supplies that Emma needed for educational participation. The debt collection harassment intensification that occurred during Sarah's crisis period included daily phone calls from Receivables Management Solutions beginning at 8:00 a.m. and continuing until 9 p.m., workplace contact threats that could affect her employment at companies that prohibited personal call interruptions, legal threats, including wage garnishment possibilities that would reduce her take-home pay below survival levels while creating additional court costs and legal complications she couldn't afford to address through attorney representation. The seasonal expense complications that Sarah couldn't anticipate included back-to-school costs for Emma's supplies, clothing, and fees that totaled $340 in late August, when Sarah's cleaning hours were reduced due to business vacation schedules, holiday expectations from Emma's classmates that created pressure for gift purchases, and celebration participation that required money Sarah needed for basic survival. Winter utility increases that made heating essential for Emma's health, while creating budget competition between warmth and food that forced impossible choices during Riverside's surprisingly cold desert nights. The credit reporting damage that continued accumulating included missed payments reported by medical providers, utility companies, and collection agencies that would remain on Sarah's credit history for 7 years, preventing access to conventional borrowing options that could provide emergency relief. Eliminating employment opportunities in financial services, retail management, or healthcare administration that required credit checks, creating permanent barriers to home ownership, vehicle financing, or apartment rentals in safer neighborhoods that could improve Emma's educational and health outcomes. The child development concerns that Emma's pediatrician, Dr. Patricia Williams, identified included academic performance delays that correlated with chronic stress and food insecurity, social adjustment problems when Emma's circumstances prevented participation in extracurricular activities that required fees or transportation, behavioral regression, including bedwetting and separation anxiety that reflected Emma's awareness of their precarious housing and financial situation, despite Sarah's attempts to shield her daughter from adult responsibilities and crisis management that dominated their household dynamics. At this moment of complete financial collapse on a Tuesday morning in late April 2024, with debt obligations totaling $34,540 that exceeded Sarah's annual gross income of $22,080, while struggling to provide basic necessities including food, housing, healthcare, and educational support for Emma, despite working more hours than most full-time employees across two physically demanding jobs. Sarah faced an impossible mathematical equation where no conventional solution could generate sufficient income increase or expense reduction to achieve basic financial stability while maintaining the employment and childcare arrangements essential for avoiding homelessness and child protective services intervention that could permanently separate her from the daughter who represented her primary motivation for continuing the exhausting struggle against systematic economic forces designed to trap working families in perpetual poverty cycles regardless of individual effort, responsibility, or moral character. The professional consultation that Sarah had pursued through Riverside County Financial Counseling Services included meetings with Counselor Maria Gonzalez, who acknowledged the mathematical impossibility of Sarah's situation while offering standard advice about budgeting, debt consolidation, and career advancement that ignored the reality of Sarah's educational limitations, transportation constraints, childcare responsibilities, and employment market conditions that made conventional financial recovery strategies inaccessible to someone trapped in survival-focused work that consumed all available time and energy while providing insufficient income for both immediate needs and long-term improvement investments. But what Sarah couldn't have known as she prepared Emma's breakfast of generic cereal with powdered milk because fresh milk had to wait until Friday's Westfield paycheck, while calculating whether she could afford both Emma's inhaler refill and the minimum payment to avoid memorial hospitals. Wage garnishment threat was that a certified letter waiting in their apartment complex's vandalized mailbox cluster would present an opportunity that every financial advisor, family member, and rational analysis would identify as guaranteed to accelerate her financial destruction while actually providing the discovery that would transform her desperate circumstances into extraordinary wealth, historical significance, and vindication of faith over conventional wisdom that a struggling single mother from Riverside could never have imagined during those dark months when survival itself required every available resource, moment of time, and reserve of emotional strength just to maintain hope that tomorrow might offer possibilities beyond the mathematical impossibility of her current trajectory toward inevitable homelessness and family separation. The life catastrophe that would ultimately transform Sarah. Chen, from an optimistic young mother into a debt-trapped single parent struggling for survival, had begun on what seemed like the happiest day of her life in June 2019, when 23-year-old Sarah received the positive pregnancy test that confirmed she and her husband, Michael Chen, were expecting their first child, just 18 months after their romantic wedding ceremony at Mission Inn in Riverside that had been featured in the local newspaper's society section as an example of love conquering all, when the daughter of Chinese immigrants married the son of a successful construction contractor who promised to provide the stable, middle-class family life that Sarah's parents had sacrificed everything to make possible through their immigration from Taiwan in 1987. The family background that shaped Sarah's life decisions included her parents David and Lily Chen's extraordinary sacrifice when they abandoned successful careers in Taipei, David as a mechanical engineer and Lily as a high school mathematics teacher, to immigrate to California with $3,400 in savings, limited English language skills, and determination to provide educational opportunities for future children that weren't available in Taiwan's restrictive academic system. The generational pressure that influenced every aspect of Sarah's upbringing included her parents' expectation that American-born children would achieve professional success that justified their immigration sacrifice. Family conversations conducted in Mandarin that emphasized education as the pathway to financial security and cultural values that prioritized family stability and child welfare above individual desires or personal fulfillment. The educational excellence that Sarah achieved through her parents' support included graduating as salutatorian from Riverside Poly High School with a 4.2 weighted GPA, acceptance to UC Riverside with partial academic scholarships covering tuition and fees, and completion of a bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in human resources management that seemed to promise stable employment. In corporate settings, where her bilingual abilities and cultural sensitivity would provide competitive advantages in California's diverse business environment. The career preparation that Sarah pursued included internships at Riverside County, government offices, volunteer work with non-profit organizations serving immigrant families, and part-time employment at Edward Jones Financial Services that provided experience in client relations and administrative procedures while helping fund her education. The relationship development that led to Sarah's marriage included meeting Michael Chen, no relation despite shared surname, during her junior year at UC Riverside when he was completing an associate degree in construction management at Riverside City College. Courtship that included Michael's promises about building a successful contracting business that would provide family financial security, and engagement that occurred when Michael presented a $4,800 diamond ring purchased through financing that demonstrated his commitment to providing the lifestyle Sarah's parents expected for their accomplished daughter. The wedding planning that consumed Sarah's senior year included expenses totaling $23 for reception venue, catering, photography, and traditional elements that honored both families' expectations, funded through combination of parental contributions, personal savings from Sarah's part-time employment, and credit card advances. That seemed manageable, given Michael's optimistic projections about his business income potential. The early marriage optimism that characterized Sarah's transition from college to married life included Michael's successful launch of Chen Construction, services with contracts for residential additions and commercial tenant improvements. Sarah's employment as human resources coordinator at Riverside Manufacturing Solutions, earning $42,000 annually, with full benefits including health insurance and retirement contributions, and apartment rental in Canyon Crest neighborhood that provided safe, middle-class housing with excellent schools for future children, while building credit history and saving for eventual home purchase that represented achievement of American dream goals her parents had envisioned. The pregnancy announcement that occurred during Sarah's second year of marriage included emotional celebration with both families, who interpreted the news as confirmation of successful family establishment. Financial planning sessions where Michael and Sarah calculated childcare costs and budget adjustments needed for single-income transition, and career discussions where Sarah planned 6-month maternity leave followed by part-time employment that would balance professional development with child-rearing responsibilities while maintaining household income sufficient for mortgage qualification and family expansion expenses. The prenatal care excellence that Sarah pursued included selection of Dr. Jennifer Martinez as obstetrician based on recommendations from Riverside Medical Center, comprehensive health insurance coverage through her employer that provided full pregnancy and delivery benefits, nutritional counseling and childbirth preparation classes that prepared Sarah for natural delivery and breastfeeding, a nursery preparation that included safety research, furniture purchase, and baby supply accumulation that demonstrated responsible preparation for parenthood, according to expert recommendations and family expectations. The business expansion confidence that Michael demonstrated during Sarah's pregnancy included hiring additional crew members for Chen construction services, equipment purchases, including new trucks and professional tools financed through business, loans, and contract bidding for larger projects, including strip mall renovations and residential developments that promised significant income increases while requiring upfront investment in materials, equipment, and labor costs that Michael calculated would generate substantial profits based on construction industry growth projections during California's economic expansion. The home purchase decision that Sarah and Michael made during her second trimester included qualification for $340,000 mortgage on three-bedroom house in Moreno Valley that provided space for growing family, good school district access, and building equity investment that financial advisors recommended as essential wealth-building strategy for young families with monthly payments of $2,280 that consumed 38% of their combined income while leaving adequate budget for childcare, savings, and emergency expenses according to conventional financial planning guidelines that both families endorsed enthusiastically. The employment benefits that Sarah's position provided included full medical coverage for pregnancy and delivery, short-term, disability payments during maternity leave, employer contribution to 401k retirement account, and job protection through Family Medical Leave Act that guaranteed position availability upon return from maternity leave, creating financial security framework that enabled responsible family planning without sacrificing career development, or long-term economic stability that educated professionals were expected to maintain throughout marriage and child-rearing years. The delivery complications that began Sarah's introduction to healthcare system failures included Emma's premature birth at 34 weeks gestation, requiring immediate NICU admission for respiratory development support, extended hospitalization totaling $187,000 for specialized neonatal care, and diagnosis of severe allergic asthma that would require ongoing medical management, including specialist care, prescription medications, and environmental modifications that weren't fully covered by insurance. Despite comprehensive policy coverage that had seemed adequate for normal pregnancy and delivery expenses, the maternity leave extension that became necessary due to Emma's medical needs included additional unpaid leave beyond standard 6-week recovery period, reduced disability payments when complications extended recovery time, and healthcare premium continuation requirements that consumed significant portion of Michael's construction income, while Sarah couldn't return to full-time employment due to Emma's medical appointment schedule and specialized care requirements that demanded maternal availability for nursing, medication administration, and respiratory therapy coordination with multiple medical specialists. The return-to-work complications that Sarah encountered included Emma's childcare challenges when daycare facilities couldn't accommodate infant, with medical needs requiring specialized attention, reduced work schedule to part-time status that maintained benefits but decreased salary to $21,000 annually, and increased healthcare costs when Emma's specialist treatments exceeded insurance coverage limits, while requiring co-payments and prescription expenses that averaged $340 monthly for respiratory medications and emergency treatments essential for Emma's survival and development. The construction industry downturn that began affecting Michael's business during Emma's first year included reduced demand for commercial construction projects due to retail sector consolidation, increased competition from established contractors who reduced bid prices to maintain work volume, and payment delays from clients experiencing their own financial pressures that created cash flow problems for Chen Construction Services, while fixed expenses including equipment loans, insurance premiums, and employee wages continued requiring monthly payments regardless of incoming revenue fluctuations. The business debt accumulation that developed during the economic slowdown included equipment financing payments totaling $1,340 monthly for trucks, and tools purchased during expansion phase, commercial insurance premiums exceeding $890 monthly for liability coverage required for bonding and contracting licenses, materials supplier accounts that demanded immediate payment while client payments were delayed 60 to 90 days, and employee payroll obligations that Michael prioritized to maintain crew loyalty while using personal credit cards and home equity line of credit to cover business expenses during revenue shortfalls. The healthcare cost escalation that accompanied Emma's ongoing medical needs included pediatric pulmonologist visits at $280 per appointment occurring monthly, prescription costs for controller medications and rescue inhalers that exceeded $450 monthly despite insurance coverage, and emergency room visits averaging $2,400 each when Emma's asthma attacks required immediate intervention with nebulizer treatments, steroid injections, and overnight observation for respiratory monitoring that couldn't be provided through routine pediatric care or urgent care facilities lacking specialized equipment. The home equity borrowing that Michael and Sarah pursued to manage escalating medical expenses included $45,000 line of credit secured by their Moreno Valley property, justified by home appreciation that had increased property value to $385,000 within 2 years of purchase with interest only. Payments of $340 monthly that seemed manageable while providing emergency fund access for medical expenses, business cash flow support, and maintaining family lifestyle during temporary income reduction, while Sarah worked part-time to manage Emma's care requirements. The family support expectations that created additional pressure included both sets of parents' assumptions that college-educated children with professional employment should achieve rapid financial success, cultural obligations for gift-giving during Chinese New Year, and family celebrations that required financial contributions Sarah and Michael couldn't afford while managing medical expenses, and social pressure to maintain middle-class appearances, including appropriate clothing, reliable vehicles, and participation in community activities that demonstrated successful integration into American professional society. The credit card dependency that developed during the crisis period included accumulation of balances totaling $18,400 across multiple accounts used for medical co-payments, business supply purchases, and household expenses. When monthly income couldn't cover all obligations, minimum monthly payments exceeding $560 that consumed increasing portion of available income, while interest charges accumulated faster than principal reduction, and credit limit reductions by card companies monitoring debt-to-income ratios that eliminated emergency borrowing capacity when unexpected expenses arose. The employment instability that Sarah experienced included pressure from Riverside Manufacturing, solutions to return to full-time schedule that conflicted with Emma's medical appointment requirements, performance evaluation concerns when frequent absences for child medical emergencies affected project completion and team responsibilities, and eventual position elimination during company restructuring that prioritized employees without family obligations requiring schedule flexibility and frequent emergency absences that affected workplace productivity and client service consistency. The unemployment benefit complications that Sarah encountered included disqualification due to voluntary resignation when she couldn't meet full-time employment requirements while managing Emma's medical needs, Extended application process requiring documentation of employment termination circumstances, and weekly benefit amounts insufficient to replace previous income while requiring active job search activities that conflicted with childcare responsibilities and Emma's specialist. Appointment schedule that occurred during typical business hours when interviews and employment orientations were scheduled. The construction industry collapse that accelerated during 2022 included commercial project cancellations when retail businesses closed permanently due to economic pressures, residential construction delays when permit processing extended timeline beyond client patience and financing terms, and material cost increases that exceeded bid estimates while contracts prevented price adjustments, forcing Chen Construction Services to complete projects at financial losses that consumed business savings and required additional borrowing to fulfill contractual obligations to avoid legal consequences and contractor license suspension. The subcontractor payment defaults that devastated Michael's business included delayed payments from general contractors experiencing their own cash flow problems, completed work worth $67,000 that remained unpaid when clients filed bankruptcy protection, and legal costs exceeding $8,400 for collection efforts that yielded minimal recovery while consuming time and resources needed for pursuing new business opportunities that were becoming increasingly scarce throughout Riverside County construction industry. The business closure necessity that Michael faced included inability to meet equipment loan payments when revenue disappeared, commercial insurance cancellation when premiums couldn't be paid while liability coverage remained legally required for active contracts, and crew termination that created unemployment compensation liability and damaged professional relationships that had taken years to develop within tight-knit construction community where reputation determined future work opportunities and subcontractor partnership possibilities. The personal bankruptcy consideration that Michael and Sarah pursued included consultation with attorney David Rodriguez, who explained Chapter 7, liquidation would eliminate business debts but couldn't address secured debt, including mortgage and vehicle loans. Legal fees totaling $3,400 for filing and documentation preparation, and credit consequences that would prevent future business licensing, equipment financing, and employment opportunities requiring financial background checks in construction and related industries. The marital stress escalation that accompanied financial crisis included arguments about spending priorities when every purchase required discussion and approval, blame attribution for business decisions and career choices that had seemed reasonable during optimistic planning phases, and emotional distance when constant crisis management consumed mental and physical energy needed for relationship maintenance, and intimacy that required emotional resources unavailable during survival-focused daily existence. The family relationship deterioration that developed during the crisis included criticism from both sets of parents about financial management and career decisions, reduced social contact when Sarah and Michael couldn't afford participation in family gatherings and celebrations, and guilt about failing to provide grandchildren with stable environment and educational opportunities that grandparents had sacrificed to make possible through their own immigration struggles and career investments. The child development concerns that emerged during the family stress period included Emma's behavioral regression, including increased separation anxiety when financial stress affected household emotional atmosphere, speech development delays that pediatrician attributed to chronic illness and environmental instability, and social interaction problems when family crisis prevented consistent participation in toddler programs and playground activities that provided peer interaction essential for normal social development during critical early childhood years. The healthcare access reduction that became necessary due to financial constraints included discontinuation of some specialist appointments when co-payments couldn't be afforded, medication rationing to extend prescription coverage when pharmacy costs exceeded available funds, and delay of recommended preventive treatments including dental care and vision screening that required immediate payment at time of service rather than insurance billing that provided temporary payment delay during cash flow shortages. The housing payment difficulties that escalated during 2023 included mortgage payment delays when construction income disappeared, home equity line of credit payments that consumed increasing portion of available funds while providing no additional borrowing capacity, and property tax obligations that created additional liens and penalties when payments couldn't be made. While struggling to maintain basic housing security essential for family stability and Emma's medical care continuity. The vehicle repossession threat that added transportation stress included missed payments on Michael's work truck when business income ended, Sarah's car payment difficulties when part-time income couldn't cover all obligations, and insurance cancellation that created liability risks while driving remained essential for medical appointments, employment seeking, and basic family transportation. Needs in suburban environment designed around automobile dependency rather than public transportation access. The utility service disconnection warnings that created daily stress included electricity termination threats when payments couldn't be made, while Emma's nebulizer required reliable power for breathing treatments. Natural gas disconnection that would eliminate heating and cooking capabilities during winter months, and water service warnings that threatened basic sanitation and health requirements, while medical conditions demanded frequent bathing and cleaning. For allergy management and infection prevention, the food assistance application that Sarah pursued through CalFresh program included extensive documentation requirements proving income, expenses, and family composition, monthly recertification obligations that required time away from employment-seeking activities, and benefit amounts insufficient for family nutritional needs, especially considering Emma's special dietary requirements. For allergy management and optimal growth during critical developmental years, when proper nutrition affected both physical and cognitive development. The legal separation discussion that Sarah and Michael began included attorney consultation about property division and child custody arrangements, financial obligations, including child support calculations based on potential future income rather than current earning capacity, and emotional trauma of acknowledging that financial stress had destroyed relationship foundation built on shared goals and mutual support that seemed inadequate for managing systematic economic pressures beyond individual control or personal responsibility. The domestic violence incident that occurred during a financial argument in September 2023 included Michael's physical aggression when Sarah questioned business decisions and suggested bankruptcy filing. Police intervention called by neighbors concerned about shouting and sounds of struggle, and restraining order application that required Michael's removal from family home while maintaining his legal obligation for mortgage payments and child support, despite elimination of income sources and business assets that had previously provided family financial foundation. The single parenthood transition that Sarah faced included immediate responsibility for all household expenses on dramatically reduced income, childcare coordination for Emma's complex medical needs without partner support, and emotional processing of relationship failure while managing practical crisis elements including housing security, income generation, and child welfare that required immediate attention and long-term planning simultaneously during period of maximum stress and minimum resources. The child support enforcement futility that Sarah experienced included family court proceedings that established $840 monthly support, obligation based on Michael's previous income, collection agency assignment when payments couldn't be made due to Michael's unemployment and business debt, and legal recognition that enforcement mechanisms couldn't generate income from individuals without assets or employment, while creating additional court costs and legal complications for both parents struggling with crisis consequences. The bankruptcy filing that Michael completed in December 2023 included Chapter 7, liquidation, that eliminated business debts and credit card obligations, but preserved secured debt including mortgage responsibility, vehicle loans, and child support obligations, while discharging Michael's legal ability to pay family obligations without eliminating moral and practical responsibility for child welfare and housing security that remained essential for Emma's health and development regardless of legal technicalities. The housing loss inevitability that Sarah faced included foreclosure proceedings when mortgage payments couldn't be maintained on single-parent income, home equity elimination when property value declined below loan balance, and rental search complications when credit damage and income insufficiency prevented qualification for apartments in safe neighborhoods with good schools and health care. Access essential for Emma's ongoing medical management and educational development. At this point in Sarah's journey, 4 years after the optimistic wedding celebration that had promised middle-class stability and family success, she found herself navigating single parenthood with a medically complex child while managing debt obligations that exceeded any reasonable earning potential available to someone with her educational background and employment experience in an economic environment that had systematically eliminated the middle-class employment opportunities that had previously supported family formation and child-rearing among college-educated professionals. The expert advice consensus that Sarah received from financial counselors, family members, and social service professionals uniformly recommended accepting permanent dependence on government assistance programs that provided survival-level support while eliminating work incentives and career development opportunities, acknowledging that individual effort and responsible decision-making couldn't overcome systematic economic forces that had transformed previous generations' pathway to middle-class success into unsustainable debt accumulation and family instability. Despite following conventional wisdom about education, career development, marriage, home ownership, and family planning. But what Sarah couldn't have known as she completed rental applications for substandard apartments in dangerous neighborhoods while calculating whether Emma's medical needs could be maintained on Medicaid coverage and food assistance was that the systematic destruction of her carefully planned middle-class life had created the desperate circumstances that would soon force her toward an impossible decision about property ownership that seemed guaranteed to complete her financial destruction, while actually providing the opportunity for discovery that would vindicate every struggle and sacrifice that had brought her to the moment when conventional wisdom offered no hope, and unconventional faith would prove more valuable than practical. Wisdom could have predicted the institutional warfare that transformed Sarah Chen from a struggling but hopeful single mother into a trapped victim of systematic oppression began with what seemed like a routine notification in March 2024, when Riverside County Child Protective Services caseworker Angela Martinez arrived unannounced at Sarah's apartment to investigate an anonymous report claiming that Emma Chen was being neglected due to parental inability to provide adequate medical care and stable housing, triggering a bureaucratic nightmare that would consume the next 6 months of Sarah's life, while threatening to permanently destroy the mother-daughter relationship that represented her only motivation for continuing the exhausting struggle against economic forces designed to eliminate working families from middle-class existence. The CPS investigation initiation that began Sarah's introduction to systematic family destruction included mandatory interviews with Emma at school without Sarah's knowledge or consent, surprise home visits that documented substandard living conditions caused by financial constraints rather than parental neglect, and requirements for voluntary compliance with case plan demands that included parenting classes, drug testing, mental health evaluations, and housing improvements that Sarah couldn't afford while working multiple jobs to prevent the homelessness that had triggered the investigation. The investigative process that caseworker Martinez conducted included photographic documentation of their cramped apartment's maintenance problems, inventory of Emma's belongings and medications, and assessment reports that characterize Sarah's financial stress as emotional instability and her work schedule as inadequate supervision, despite her careful arrangements for Emma's care through registered childcare providers and family support networks. The case plan requirements that CPS imposed included mandatory participation in parenting education classes offered only during weekday hours when Sarah needed to be working, weekly supervised visitation with Emma despite no evidence of abuse or actual neglect, and court-ordered psychological evaluation costing $890 that Sarah couldn't afford while managing basic survival expenses, with caseworker warnings that non-compliance would result in temporary custody removal, while compliance would consume time and money essential for addressing the underlying financial problems that had created the appearance of neglect in the first place. The drug testing humiliation that Sarah endured included weekly urinalysis appointments at Riverside County Testing Facility, requiring transportation costs and time away from employment opportunities, random scheduling that conflicted with work obligations and childcare arrangements, and testing fees of $67 per session that accumulated to monthly expenses exceeding $280, while providing no benefit to Emma's welfare or family stability, creating additional financial burden during the crisis period when every dollar was needed for housing security and medical care that represented genuine child welfare priorities rather than bureaucratic compliance exercises. The mental health evaluation requirement that CPS mandated included psychological assessment by Dr. Patricia Williams, who concluded that Sarah's anxiety and depression symptoms were consistent with financial stress rather than underlying mental illness, but recommended ongoing therapy that cost $150 per session with sliding scale provider, while noting that Sarah's protective instincts and child-focused priorities demonstrated appropriate maternal bonding despite environmental stresses that were beyond individual control and not indicative of parenting deficiencies or child safety concerns. The parenting class mandate that Sarah fulfilled included 12 weeks of sessions at Riverside Family Services covering topics like appropriate discipline techniques and child safety awareness that Sarah already understood and practiced effectively, while missing work hours that reduced her income by approximately $340 monthly and requiring additional childcare expenses for evening classes, with instructor Janet Rodriguez acknowledging that Sarah demonstrated excellent parenting knowledge and child advocacy skills, while facing systematic barriers that prevented adequate resource access despite appropriate parenting intentions and capabilities. The supervised visitation requirements that lasted 4 months included weekly 3-hour sessions at county facility, where Sarah and Emma were monitored by social work intern Kevin Thompson, who documented their normal, loving interaction patterns and appropriate parent-child bonding, while noting that supervision was unnecessary given observed family dynamics, but required for case plan completion, costing Sarah $45 per session for facility usage while consuming weekend time that could have been spent pursuing employment opportunities or addressing housing instability that represented actual threats to family welfare. The housing inspection demands that CPS imposed included requirements for adequate living space that exceeded Sarah's financial capacity, safety modifications, including window guards and outlet covers that cost $180 for supplies and installation, and documentation of stable housing arrangements when eviction proceedings made long-term housing impossible to guarantee, with caseworker recommendations for improved living conditions that ignored the mathematical reality that Sarah's income couldn't support better housing while managing medical expenses and basic survival needs for herself and Emma. The employment interference that CPS created included workplace contact when caseworker Martinez called Sarah's supervisors at Westfield Business Center and Memorial Hospital to verify employment stability, resulting in supervisor concerns about Sarah's personal problems affecting work performance and scheduling complications when mandatory CPS appointments conflicted with work obligations, leading to reduced hours and supervisor documentation of attendance issues that threatened Sarah's employment security, while she was required to demonstrate income stability for case plan compliance. The family separation threat that dominated the investigation included preliminary removal orders that would place Emma in foster care if Sarah couldn't demonstrate immediate compliance with case plan requirements, emergency custody hearings, where Sarah represented herself because legal aid attorneys had waiting lists exceeding 8 weeks, and judicial warnings that failure to provide adequate housing and medical care could result in permanent termination of parental rights, despite clear evidence that financial constraints rather than parental inadequacy created the appearance of neglect. The legal representation inadequacy that Sarah experienced included overworked public defenders who handled dozens of simultaneous cases, court-appointed attorneys who met clients for 15 minutes before hearings, and legal aid lawyers who acknowledged that the system is designed to separate poor families rather than provide support for family preservation, while advising Sarah to comply with all requirements regardless of cost or practicality, because non-compliance guarantees family separation while compliance provides hope for eventual case closure. The medical care documentation demands that CPS required included monthly reports from Emma's pediatrician confirming medication compliance and appointment attendance, detailed records of emergency room visits with explanation of circumstances leading to each incident, and verification of insurance coverage and prescription access, while caseworker Martinez noted that Emma's medical needs were appropriately managed given available resources, but expressed concern about medication rationing when Sarah couldn't afford prescription refills without delaying rent payments essential for housing stability. The school system collaboration that intensified CPS scrutiny included mandatory reporting by Riverside Elementary teachers who were required to document Emma's appearance, behavior, and academic performance. Principal Susan Martinez, no relation to caseworker, who provided reports about Emma's occasional absences during medical appointments and difficulty concentrating during periods of family stress, and school nurse Patricia Kim, who confirmed Emma's medication compliance and appropriate management of asthma symptoms, despite obvious signs of family financial hardship affecting Emma's social participation and educational resources. The financial scrutiny that CPS conducted included monthly income verification requirements, showing proof of all earnings and expenses, bank account monitoring to ensure appropriate spending priorities, and criticism of expenditure decisions when Sarah purchased Emma's school supplies rather than making full rent payments, with caseworker documentation suggesting that financial management counseling might be necessary despite obvious evidence that inadequate income rather than poor budgeting created the family's survival challenges. The community surveillance that developed during the investigation included neighbor interviews, where Mrs. Rodriguez praised Sarah's parenting dedication while expressing concern about family stress levels. Apartment manager reports about late rent payments and maintenance requests that documented housing inadequacy and informal monitoring by other residents who felt pressured to report any concerns about Emma's welfare to avoid potential liability for failure to report suspected neglect under mandatory reporting requirements that encouraged neighborhood surveillance of struggling families. The case closure conditions that CPS established included 6 months of successful compliance with case plan requirements, demonstration of housing stability through lease agreement and current rent payments, and adequate income verification showing ability to maintain basic necessities without assistance, effectively requiring Sarah to solve the financial crisis that had created the appearance of neglect before CPS would acknowledge that no actual neglect existed, creating circular logic where poverty itself became evidence of parental inadequacy requiring intervention. The welfare system trap that Sarah discovered included CalWorks, benefits that required work participation hours, conflicting with CPS mandated appointments, food stamp calculations that penalized employment income and encouraged welfare dependency, and Medicaid eligibility reviews that threatened Emma's healthcare coverage, when Sarah's variable income from multiple part-time jobs exceeded monthly limits despite annual earnings remaining below poverty guidelines, creating systematic incentives for unemployment and benefit dependence rather than work-based family stability. The employment discrimination that resulted from CPS involvement included background check concerns when employers learned about child welfare investigations, supervisor assumptions about personal problems affecting work reliability, and co-worker speculation about Sarah's fitness as a parent when frequent appointments and court appearances required schedule modifications, leading to reduced hours, eliminated overtime opportunities, and eventual termination from Memorial Hospital position when attendance requirements couldn't be met while complying with mandatory CPS obligations. The healthcare system coordination that CPS required included monthly case conferences with Emma's medical team, documentation of all treatment decisions and medication changes, and approval for treatment modifications through caseworker consultation, creating additional bureaucratic layers that delayed medical care and increased appointment complexity, while adding no benefit to Emma's health outcomes, with Dr. Jennifer Martinez noting that CPS involvement created unnecessary stress for family while adding no value to medical decision-making process. The educational impact that CPS investigation created included Emma's behavioral changes when she learned about potential family separation, academic performance decline during periods of maximum family stress, and social isolation when other parents learned about child welfare involvement and restricted their children's interaction with Emma to avoid perceived association with troubled family, despite Emma's normal development and appropriate social skills that demonstrated effective parenting under difficult circumstances. The court system inefficiency that prolonged Sarah's ordeal included hearing delays that extended case timeline, beyond necessary duration, judicial rotations that required repeated explanation of family circumstances to different judges unfamiliar with case details, and procedural requirements that prioritized documentation compliance over actual child welfare assessment, with family court judge Robert Kim acknowledging that most families involved in dependency proceedings are struggling with poverty rather than parenting deficiencies, while being required to follow protocols designed around abuse cases rather than neglect allegations based on financial constraints. The foster care preparation that CPS initiated, despite lack of evidence for removal, included placement resource identification for Emma's potential custody transfer, home study preparations for relative placement with Sarah's parents, who lived in expensive Orange County location that would disrupt Emma's medical care continuity, and transition planning that traumatized Emma through discussions about living arrangements if mommy can't take care of you anymore, creating psychological damage to address non-existent safety concerns while ignoring actual family welfare priorities. The administrative burden that consumed Sarah's limited time included weekly case plan review meetings requiring transportation and childcare arrangements, monthly progress reports documenting compliance with requirements, and quarterly court hearings demanding legal preparation and professional appearance despite financial inability to afford appropriate clothing or reliable transportation, consuming hours that could have been spent on employment activities or income generation that would address underlying problems rather than managing bureaucratic oversight of poverty-related challenges. The interagency coordination failures that multiplied Sarah's stress included conflicting requirements between CPS case plan and CalWorks work participation mandates, scheduling conflicts between court hearings and welfare office appointments, and communication gaps between agencies that required Sarah to provide duplicate documentation and repeated explanations of circumstances, while each agency operated independently without consideration of cumulative burden placed on families navigating multiple systems simultaneously during crisis periods. The privacy elimination that CPS involvement created included home visits without advance notice, personal financial information sharing between agencies without consent, and detailed documentation of family private matters in case files accessible to multiple government employees, with caseworker explanations that voluntary cooperation was required while resistance to investigation would be interpreted as evidence of lack of commitment to child welfare and potential grounds for accelerated removal proceedings. The cultural bias that influenced CPS assessment included assumptions about appropriate parenting practices based on middle-class European American standards that didn't account for immigrant family traditions, economic criticism that ignored systematic barriers facing working families, and evaluation criteria that prioritized material resources over emotional bonding and child advocacy, that represented actual indicators of effective parenting under adverse circumstances. The mandatory reporting expansion that occurred during investigation included requirements for all service providers to report any concerns about Emma's welfare, healthcare workers who documented family stress as potential neglect indicators, and educational personnel who were required to monitor and report family circumstances rather than provide support services, creating surveillance network that discouraged help-seeking behavior and increased family isolation during periods when community support could have provided beneficial assistance. The case file documentation that accumulated during 6 months of investigation included hundreds of pages of reports, assessments, and correspondence that characterized Sarah's financial crisis as parental deficiency, described appropriate stress responses to impossible circumstances as mental health concerns, and documented compliance with unnecessary requirements as evidence of successful intervention, creating permanent record that would follow Emma throughout childhood and potentially affect future family stability if any additional reports were made. The family preservation rhetoric that CPS used included official policy statements about maintaining family unity whenever possible, while implementing procedures that treated poverty as evidence of neglect, required families to resolve systematic economic problems through individual effort, and threatened family separation for inability to overcome structural barriers that prevented adequate resource access despite appropriate parenting intentions and capabilities, creating contradiction between stated goals and actual practices that traumatized families experiencing economic hardship. The success definition that CPS applied included family maintenance of adequate housing and income for 6 consecutive months, demonstration of improved parenting skills through class completion and evaluation compliance, and elimination of conditions that had prompted initial investigation, effectively requiring families to achieve middle-class stability before acknowledging that no actual abuse or neglect existed, while providing no assistance with addressing underlying systematic barriers that created appearance of inadequate care. The case closure ceremony that occurred in September 2024 included judicial recognition that no evidence of abuse or neglect had been substantiated, acknowledgement that Sarah had demonstrated appropriate parenting throughout investigation, and commendation for successful completion of case plan requirements, while providing no compensation for 6 months of trauma, lost employment opportunities, legal expenses, and emotional damage inflicted on Emma through unnecessary family separation threats based on poverty rather than safety concerns. The ongoing surveillance that continued after case closure included mandatory reporting requirements that would trigger immediate reinvestigation if Emma missed school due to medical appointments, if family experienced additional housing instability, or if any community member reported concerns about Emma's welfare, creating permanent vulnerability to future intervention based on appearance of neglect caused by systematic barriers rather than parenting inadequacy, while providing no support for addressing underlying conditions that created initial referral. The psychological recovery that Sarah and Emma required included therapy for trauma symptoms caused by investigation rather than original circumstances, trust rebuilding between mother and daughter after months of uncertainty about family stability, and stress management for ongoing fear of future CPS involvement that could result from continued poverty-related challenges beyond Sarah's individual control, creating additional expenses and emotional burden while families attempted to rebuild stability after unnecessary institutional intervention. At this point in Sarah's journey, 18 months after her separation from Michael and 6 months after successful completion of unnecessary CPS investigation, she found herself trapped in a system designed to punish poverty while providing no pathways for economic improvement, facing ongoing surveillance that could trigger future family separation based on circumstances beyond individual control while managing the accumulated debt, legal expenses and employment losses that resulted from complying with bureaucratic requirements that addressed appearance of neglect rather than actual child welfare priorities. The expert consensus that social workers, attorneys and family counselors provided included recognition that the system treats poverty as child abuse while providing no economic support for family stability, acknowledgement that most families in dependency proceedings need financial assistance rather than parenting instruction, and admission that current policies create more trauma than they prevent, while being required to implement procedures that prioritized bureaucratic compliance over actual child and family welfare outcomes. But what Sarah couldn't have known as she completed final case plan requirements while calculating whether Emma's prescription refills could be afforded without triggering late rent payments that might prompt new CPS concerns was that the systematic oppression that had consumed 6 months of her life while threatening to destroy her family had actually prepared her for making decisions based on survival, necessity rather than conventional wisdom, creating the desperation and determination that would soon enable her to pursue opportunities that rational analysis would reject while institutional expertise would unanimously oppose, ultimately leading to discovery that would vindicate her. faith in maternal instincts over professional recommendations, and demonstrate that individual courage could triumph over systematic oppression designed to eliminate hope and possibility from lives of working families struggling against forces beyond their control or responsibility. The certified letter that would transform Sarah Chen's life from systematic oppression to extraordinary vindication arrived on October 23, 2024, in the vandalized mailbox cluster at Vista Gardens apartment complex, delivered by postal worker Maria Santos, who later testified that she had personally ensured the registered mail reached Sarah, despite concerns about the dangerous neighborhood, where drug activity and property crime made mail delivery hazardous for postal employees working alone during evening hours. The inheritance notification from Barstow probate attorney Jennifer Martinez informed Sarah that she had been named sole beneficiary of the Desert Vista Motel property by one Elena Rodriguez, an elderly woman who had worked as a social worker for San Bernardino County for 37 years before her death in September 2024, and who had apparently followed Sarah's struggles through professional networks and court records before making the extraordinary decision to leave her property to a stranger facing circumstances that reminded Elena of her own early career challenges during the 1980s. The estate attorney consultation that Sarah arranged using her final $180 in emergency savings revealed that Elena Rodriguez had purchased the Desert Vista Motel in 1987 as a retirement investment property that generated rental income until a devastating electrical fire in 2018 had destroyed the main office, damaged 15 of 32 rooms, and created water damage throughout the facility when sprinkler systems continued operating for 6 hours before fire department personnel could locate and disable the main water controls. Attorney Martinez explained that inheritance acceptance would make Sarah immediately responsible for $43,000 in accumulated property taxes spanning 6 years, ongoing insurance premiums of $890 monthly for liability coverage required by San Bernardino County, and immediate repair costs estimated between $67,000 and $89,000 just to make the structure safe for basic occupancy while located 60 miles from Riverside in remote Barstow, where employment opportunities were limited to truck stops, chain restaurants, and retail positions paying minimum wage without benefits or advancement potential. The property inspection that Sarah conducted using borrowed gasoline money for transportation revealed conditions worse than attorney warnings had suggested, with fire damage that had created partial roof collapse in the main office building, water damage from years of exposure that had rotted wooden structures and created extensive mold problems throughout the facility, structural issues that made large portions of the complex unsafe for occupancy, and vandalism from squatters who had used rooms for drug activity and temporary shelter while leaving behind debris, graffiti, and biohazard contamination that would require professional cleaning services before any renovation work could begin safely. The family intervention that Sarah endured when she mentioned the inheritance included emotional confrontation from her mother, Lily Chen, who tearfully pleaded with Sarah to stop making decisions that will hurt Emma, practical opposition from her father, David Chen, who calculated that property obligations would consume Sarah's entire income while providing no residential value, and unanimous family consensus that accepting inheritance would accelerate rather than prevent financial collapse, while stranding Sarah and Emma in geographic isolation 60 miles from medical specialists, equality schools, and employment opportunities essential for single mother survival and child welfare. The expert consultation that Sarah pursued using money borrowed from her sister Jennifer included building inspector Robert Kim, who estimated repair costs of €127,000 to $189,000 for basic habitability, while noting structural damage that might make renovation economically impossible. Contractor Miguel Santos, who warned about hidden damage, including potential asbestos and lead paint contamination requiring specialized remediation services, and real estate agent Patricia Williams, who described the property as unsuitable for anyone seeking reasonable access to employment, medical care, or modern conveniences, while confirming that similar properties in Barstow had remained unsold. For years, due to economic decline and population loss, the financial analysis that Sarah completed showed that property acquisition would require immediate payment of $43 in back taxes plus approximately $89,000 in basic repairs, totaling $132,000 in immediate obligations, while creating ongoing monthly expenses of $240 for insurance, utilities, and basic maintenance, compared to her current income of $1.840 monthly from part-time cleaning work, making property ownership mathematically impossible according to conventional financial planning, while offering no income potential in Barstow's depressed economic environment where tourism had declined. And interstate commerce provided few opportunities for small business development. The legal deadline pressure that property tax authorities imposed included 30-day requirement for inheritance acceptance and tax payment, foreclosure proceedings that would eliminate inheritance opportunity if obligations weren't satisfied immediately, and warning that property abandonment would create ongoing liability for Sarah despite inheritance refusal, while attorney Martinez acknowledged that no rational financial analysis would recommend accepting this property, given Sarah's circumstances and the mathematical impossibility of successful ownership based on current income and expense projections. The desperate decision that Sarah made despite universal opposition included liquidating her remaining possessions through emergency garage sale that yielded $2,400 in cash, borrowing $8,900 from predatory lenders at interest rates exceeding 180% annually, secured by her vehicle title, and using Emma's small college fund of $200 to complete tax payment requirements, while acknowledging that inheritance acceptance would consume her final financial resources and potentially worsen, rather than improve their circumstances, but recognizing that conventional solutions had failed to provide any pathway out of systematic oppression that guaranteed continued poverty and ongoing CPS vulnerability. The point of no return that Sarah reached on November 15, 2024, included signing inheritance documents that made her responsible for all property obligations, arranging emergency tax payment through money orders and certified funds that exhausted her available resources, and loading Emma and their few remaining possessions into her unreliable Honda Civic for the 60-mile drive to Barstow, while family members refused to say goodbye and social workers warned that remote location would create additional challenges for maintaining Emma's medical care and educational continuity essential for child welfare. The arrival at Desert Vista Motel on November 18, 2024, revealed property conditions that exceeded worst-case scenarios presented by experts, with fire damage more extensive than photographs had shown, water intrusion that had created structural instability in main buildings, and squatter debris including drug paraphernalia, human waste, and hazardous materials that made immediate occupancy impossible, while winter weather approaching required immediate shelter solutions for Sarah and Emma's basic survival during high desert temperature extremes that could reach freezing at night. 2. Initial survival arrangements that Sarah managed included clearing debris from room 237 that appeared structurally sound, using camping equipment purchased with final cash reserves for basic sleeping and cooking needs, and establishing temporary water access through garden hose connection to functioning utility line, while attempting to secure one room that could provide basic shelter during renovation planning and emergency utility installation that would cost approximately $3,400 for electricity, water, and heating systems essential for winter habitability. The isolation reality that Sarah confronted included cell phone service that required driving 12 miles to reach reliable coverage, internet access that was non-existent without expensive, satellite installation costing $809 plus monthly fees, grocery shopping that demanded 40-mile round trips to reach basic supplies, and medical care access that would require 70-mile drives to reach Emma's specialists in Riverside, creating transportation costs and time requirements that exceeded Sarah's resources, while threatening continuity of medical care essential for Emma's respiratory health management. The winter preparation emergency that Sarah faced included high desert weather conditions that would make unheated shelter dangerous for Emma's asthma, heating system requirements that demanded professional installation beyond Sarah's financial capacity, and insulation needs that were essential for survival during approaching freezing temperatures, while creating additional expenses that competed with food and medical care priorities essential for basic family welfare during transition period. The systematic exploration that Sarah undertook during her first week of ownership included room-by-room assessment of fire and water damage, structural evaluation using basic tools found in abandoned maintenance areas, and careful documentation of repair priorities that might enable gradual restoration within severely limited budget constraints, while prioritizing Emma's immediate needs for safe shelter, heating, and continued access to respiratory medications that required reliable transportation and medical appointment scheduling. The building investigation that revealed surprising discoveries included evidence that fire damage had been contained primarily to office and common areas, while many individual rooms remained structurally intact. Original 1970s construction that used solid materials and professional craftsmanship superior to modern budget construction, and electrical systems that had been upgraded in 2015 but remained functional in undamaged sections, suggesting that selective renovation might enable habitable restoration at costs lower than expert estimates while providing temporary residence during gradual improvement process. The Room 237 focus that emerged during Sarah's detailed inspection occurred when she discovered that this particular unit had suffered minimal fire damage while containing unusual features, including reinforced walls that seemed disproportionately thick for standard motel construction, electrical connections that appeared more extensive than typical room requirements, and acoustic properties that created strange echoing effects when Emma played in the space, prompting Sarah to investigate structural anomalies that didn't match other rooms in the facility. The wallpaper removal project that Sarah began in Room 237 as her first renovation attempt included peeling away layers of dated floral patterns that revealed multiple previous decoration schemes, using basic tools and manual labor that cost nothing while providing visible progress toward habitability improvement. When careful removal of adhesive backing near the bathroom area revealed edges of what appeared to be concealed doorway or access panel that had been covered by wallpaper installation sometime during the 1990s, based on adhesive composition and paper manufacturing dates. The hidden door discovery that occurred when Sarah used a box cutter to investigate wallpaper anomalies revealed a reinforced steel door concealed behind false wall construction, with access panel that opened to expose professional-grade security hardware, including electronic locks, surveillance camera connections, and ventilation systems that appeared far more sophisticated than standard motel room features, suggesting that room 237 had been modified for purposes beyond typical hospitality accommodation during some period of the motel's operational history. The concealed chamber investigation that Sarah conducted using her cell phone flashlight revealed a fully functional interrogation facility approximately 15 feet by 20 feet, accessed through soundproofed entry corridor and containing professional interview furniture, recording equipment with multi-camera positioning, psychological assessment materials, and climate-controlled storage systems that had remained operational. Despite the building's abandonment, with electrical infrastructure separate from main building systems that had continued functioning through independent power supply and backup battery systems. The documentation discovery that occurred when Sarah opened filing cabinets and storage systems revealed hundreds of manila folders containing FBI letterhead documents, surveillance reports with classification markings spanning 1987 through 2003, correspondence between federal agents detailing domestic surveillance operations, and operational records documenting intelligence activities that had been conducted from the Desert Vista Motel location during 16 years of covert operations targeting environmental activists, anti-nuclear protesters, and indigenous rights organizations throughout the southwestern United States. The file examination that Sarah conducted revealed detailed surveillance records of civil rights activists, including photographs, wiretap transcripts, and operational reports that documented domestic intelligence programs conducted without public knowledge, court authorization, or congressional oversight, with evidence of constitutional violations including illegal surveillance, infiltration of political organizations, and disruption activities that had been denied by federal officials during congressional investigations that demanded disclosure of domestic surveillance program documentation. The authentication research that Sarah pursued using library internet access in Barstow revealed that many discovered files contained information about surveillance programs that had been subjects of congressional oversight hearings, federal court cases demanding disclosure of FBI domestic surveillance activities, and academic research that had been unable to locate primary source documentation that appeared to be preserved in the motel's hidden facility, suggesting that her discovery represented evidence of domestic surveillance programs that had been concealed from legislative oversight and public scrutiny for over 20 years. The legal consultation that Sarah arranged through secure communication methods led her to contact attorney David Chen at the Government Accountability Project in Washington, D.C., who confirmed after reviewing photographed documents that Sarah's discovery potentially qualified for substantial federal whistleblower protection under laws designed to encourage disclosure of government misconduct, with preliminary assessment suggesting that documented evidence could provide critical support for ongoing congressional investigations of FBI domestic surveillance overreach during the 1990s. The document organization project that Sarah undertook revealed systematic nature of the hidden archive, with files organized by operation names, target categories, and chronological periods that indicated decades of coordinated surveillance activities, including over 1,147 individual documents spanning domestic surveillance operations, memoranda between FBI directors and field agents, operational budgets for activities funded without congressional knowledge, and correspondence revealing coordination between federal agencies and local law enforcement for surveillance programs that violated constitutional protections and civil liberties. The federal investigation that began when Sarah contacted congressional intelligence oversight committees resulted in immediate FBI verification of document authenticity through classified database cross-referencing, recognition that her discovery represented the most significant domestic surveillance document recovery since church committee investigations of the 1970s. and acknowledgement that preserved evidence filled critical gaps in historical understanding of intelligence community. Constitutional violations that had been denied or concealed from public oversight for decades. The whistleblower protection that federal investigators provided included personal security measures due to sensitive nature of disclosed materials, legal representation for navigating federal disclosure procedures, and preliminary compensation. Assessment under federal whistleblower protection statutes that provided financial awards for disclosures contributing substantially to congressional oversight and historical accountability for government misconduct, with initial evaluations suggesting maximum compensation levels due to significance and completeness of discovered documentation. The authentication process that federal investigators conducted included forensic analysis of paper composition, ink analysis, and printing methods that confirmed documents' authenticity and chronological accuracy, cross-reference verification, with existing declassified materials that corroborated operational details and personnel names, and historical analysis that placed discovered documents within known FBI surveillance programs while providing previously missing evidence of constitutional violations that had been suspected but never documented through primary source materials. The congressional testimony that Sarah provided included detailed briefings for House and Senate Intelligence Oversight Committees, expert consultation about surveillance facility construction and operational capabilities, and historical context about motel property usage during covert operations, with congressional leaders acknowledging that her disclosure provided essential evidence for implementing reforms designed to prevent future constitutional violations while ensuring accountability for historical misconduct that had undermined democratic institutions and civil liberties protections. The compensation determination that federal officials announced in January 2025 included whistleblower reward assessment of $8.9 million under federal protection statutes, representing near maximum compensation for disclosures providing substantial assistance to congressional oversight and historical accountability efforts, with payment structure including immediate award of $2 million for initial disclosure and cooperation with authentication processes, quarterly payments totaling $4.5 million over 18 months for ongoing assistance with congressional hearings and legal proceedings, and final payment of $2 million upon completion of investigation and implementation of policy reforms based on disclosed evidence. The debt elimination process that Sarah's compensation enabled included immediate payment of all accumulated obligations totaling $34,540, plus collection costs and legal fees, resolution of CPS-related legal expenses and credit damage repair, and establishment of legal representation for addressing remaining issues while creating financial foundation for long-term stability and Emma's educational and medical needs, eliminating systematic barriers that had trapped family in poverty cycle while providing resources for genuine security and opportunity advancement. The property transformation that Sarah's financial security enabled included complete renovation of Desert Vista Motel into combination residential and research facility, installation of modern utilities and high-speed internet infrastructure, enabling remote consulting work, preservation of historical interrogation facility as educational archive, honoring significance of constitutional accountability and government transparency, and conversion of motel rooms into library space, conference facility, and guest accommodations for researchers and civil liberties advocates studying domestic surveillance history. The consulting opportunities that emerged from Sarah's disclosure included contracts with congressional oversight committees valuing her analytical skills and attention to detail for ongoing investigation of intelligence community activities. Academic institutions seeking assistance with historical research about domestic surveillance programs. Government reform organizations wanting insights about improving whistleblower protection systems, and civil liberties groups requesting consultation about constitutional accountability and transparency advocacy that utilize Sarah's unique experience with both systematic oppression and government accountability processes. The educational transformation that Sarah achieved included completion of bachelor's degree through online programs funded by compensation awards, graduate study in public administration focusing on government accountability and civil liberties, protection, and academic research contributing to scholarly understanding of domestic surveillance impact on constitutional democracy, while providing Emma with educational opportunities including private tutoring, specialized medical care, and enrichment programs that had been impossible during poverty period. The community impact that Sarah's work created included establishment of Desert Vista Institute for Government Accountability, providing research facilities and educational programs for studying constitutional protection and transparency advocacy, hosting conferences and workshops for whistleblower protection and civil liberties education, and creating scholarship programs for students from low-income families pursuing public service careers focused on democratic accountability and social justice advocacy. The family relationship restoration that financial security enabled included rebuilding connections with parents and sister who acknowledged that Sarah's impossible decision had proven correct, providing support for extended family members. Facing economic challenges and creating stable foundation for Emma's healthy development, including consistent medical care, educational excellence, and social opportunities that demonstrated positive outcomes of maternal courage and determination during systematic oppression. The historical legacy that Sarah's discovery achieved included contribution to scholarly understanding of FBI domestic surveillance overreach, support for congressional reforms establishing stronger oversight of intelligence community activities, preservation of documentary evidence that had been missing from public records for decades, and demonstration that individual courage could expose institutional misconduct while advancing constitutional accountability and democratic transparency that benefited entire society beyond personal circumstances. The vindication message that Sarah's journey provided included proof that maintaining ethical principles during systematic oppression could create opportunities for extraordinary service, demonstration that maternal instincts and survival-focused decision-making could triumph over expert advice and conventional wisdom when institutional systems failed to protect family welfare, and evidence that individual persistence in face of impossible circumstances could reveal hidden resources that transformed personal crisis into public benefit and historical contribution to constitutional democracy. The life transformation that Sarah accomplished included transition from systematically oppressed single mother to nationally recognized expert on government accountability, conversion of desperate survival circumstances into meaningful career, serving constitutional protection and civil liberties advancement, and demonstration that faith-based decision-making during crisis could create outcomes that vindicated personal courage while contributing to societal benefit beyond individual welfare or family security concerns. Sarah Chen's extraordinary journey from desperate single mother facing homelessness and family separation to nationally significant whistleblower and constitutional accountability advocate proved that sometimes the most seemingly impossible choices, which appear guaranteed to accelerate failure, according to all expert analysis and conventional wisdom, can lead to outcomes that vindicate faith in maternal instincts over professional recommendations, while demonstrating that individual courage, during systematic oppression can create historical change extending far beyond personal circumstances to serve democratic institutions and constitutional protections. The Desert Vista Motel, that had seemed like Sarah's final desperate mistake, had become the foundation for a new life of financial security, meaningful work, and historical significance that honored both her commitment to Emma's welfare and her dedication to truth and justice. Sarah's story proved that maintaining ethical principles during institutional failure could create opportunities for extraordinary public service, and that individual persistence in the face of systematic oppression could reveal hidden possibilities that transformed personal survival into constitutional accountability and democratic advancement. The hidden FBI interrogation facility that Sarah discovered behind faded wallpaper had contained more than classified documents. It had concealed the evidence that would transform a struggling single mother into a guardian of constitutional democracy, proving that sometimes the most desperate decisions made by the most vulnerable people can become the foundation for protecting the freedoms and institutions that define American democracy, while demonstrating that maternal love and courage can triumph over systematic oppression to create legacy of justice that extends far beyond individual family welfare to benefit entire society's commitment to transparency, accountability, and constitutional protection. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.